I knew she was cheating the moment she handed me my own cufflinks with shaking hands. Not because of guilt. Isolde Wynne Pierce didn't believe in guilt, but because she'd only ever touched them once before, the night we buried my mother. Now she stood before me in our marble-tiled dressing suite, eyes dry, voice too calm, rehearsing lines she didn't write. "Luca's just a consultant, Grayson. He admires your work." That was the moment. Not the betrayal. I could survive betrayal. It was the insult to my intelligence that broke something deeper. The quiet arrogance in thinking I wouldn't notice, that I wouldn't care, that I was too soft, too gay, too distracted by fatherhood and fortune to fight back. I smiled, buttoned the cuffs, and silently began orchestrating the end of their story. Because when your wife's lover thinks he can rob you in plain sight, the only appropriate response is to let him try, while the trap closes around his throat. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to share where you're watching from. We love seeing how our stories bring people together from every corner of the world. Your thoughts and comments are what make this community so special, and we're truly grateful to have you here. If you haven't already, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story filled with drama, resilience, and unexpected twists. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and maybe grab your favorite drink because this is a tale you won't want to miss. Let's get started. I didn't know which was worse, that I could smell his cologne in my hallway, or that Isolde had stopped trying to hide it. We were 10 minutes out from hosting our daughter's cello recital in the parlor, and the entire townhouse smelled like Luca Barone's stupid woodsy musk, the kind favored by men who describe themselves as intellectually nomadic on LinkedIn and emotionally available on dating apps. I stood in the doorway of our marble-clad kitchen, holding a glass of mineral water and watching my wife smear rose gold gloss across her bottom lip in the reflection of the toaster. "You should change ties," she said, not turning around. "The navy one. This is Sage's moment. The red feels aggressive." Sage's moment. Of course, it always was, when Isolde needed the appearance of motherhood. I adjusted the knot of my red tie anyway. That detail would matter more later, when everything fell apart. Luca arrived late. Not conspicuously so, just enough to draw a few glances. He wore a charcoal blazer over a tight sweater that clung to his gym-bodied vanity. He clasped my hand too firmly. Smiled with all his teeth. "Grayson," he said, like we were old friends from prep school. "Thanks for letting me crash this. I hear Sage is exceptional." "She is," I replied evenly, "and punctual." If he heard the insult, he didn't flinch. But Isolde did, just for a second. Her hand grazed the back of his elbow like a signal before she moved to greet arriving guests. People said we were the perfect couple, a legacy marriage. Upper East Side royalty. We had the townhouse, the children, the charities, the curated holiday cards. We had the elegance. What we didn't have, hadn't had for over a year, was trust. The recital went smoothly. Sage played with poise and heart, her fingers slicing Bach into the quiet like she'd been born in a concert hall. Jonah, her older brother, filmed it from the staircase landing, beaming with pride. Isolde teared up and dabbed at her eyes with a linen handkerchief. And Luca sat 3 rows from the front, watching my daughter like he already belonged in our lives. He didn't. And I was going to remind them both of that, soon. Later that night, after the guests had left and Sage was asleep, Jonah wandered into my study. 14 going on 40, all cheekbones and quiet wisdom. "Is Luca staying over again?" he asked. I blinked. "Why would you think that?" He shrugged, eyes tracking the floor. "His car was gone last time I woke up early, but he was still here in the morning." That landed heavy. I closed my laptop, suddenly more tired than before. "He's a friend of your mother's," I said carefully. "Sometimes he helps with her consulting work." Jonah looked up then, direct and unblinking. You don't have to lie to protect her. And just like that, the whole floor dropped out beneath me. In all the time I'd spent trying to shield my children from their mother's choices, I'd underestimated them. Or maybe I hadn't wanted to admit they were old enough to see what she thought she was hiding. The next morning, I found Isolde in the sunroom, sipping green juice and scrolling through one of those hyper-curated private art broker apps. She was circling a piece I'd already vetoed, some tragic sculpture of a bird in a bell jar. "Jonah said something to me last night," I said, keeping my tone neutral. She didn't look up. That's rare. He asked if Luca was living here. That made her pause. I let the silence stretch. "Do I need to ask you outright?" She set her tablet down slowly, like she was placing a loaded weapon on a negotiation table. "I've never hidden the fact that Luca is important to me. You've never admitted it, either." She exhaled hard, the way someone does before opening a particularly ugly envelope. "Grayson, you checked out years ago. After your mother died, you stopped showing up. For me, for us. Don't confuse grief with negligence," I snapped. "One is human, the other is choice." She stood, smoothing down the front of her silk robe. "You built a world of silence, Grayson, of control. You don't yell, you don't rage, you just disappear into your spreadsheets and your structured routine. At least Luca sees me." I nodded slowly, tasting each word before I said it. "And does he see your prenup? Or just the inheritance clause?" She slapped me. Not hard, but sharp. A surgical hit. More insult than injury. I didn't touch my face. I didn't raise my voice. Instead, I said, "Thank you. That's the first honest thing you've done in months." She turned and walked out, barefoot, furious, leaving the scent of her cruelty in the air like perfume. I stood there for several long minutes before pulling out my phone. I dialed Kieran Wells, my lawyer, old college friend, the only person who knew how deep my patience ran and how brutal I could be when I decided the line had been crossed. When he answered, I said only one thing. "It's time." Later that week, Isolde went to a gallery opening in Tribeca with Luca. I stayed home and watched the house cameras. I'd installed them years ago after a break-in scare, but now they served a more intimate purpose. At 11:42 p.m., Luca entered my study alone. He looked around like a man who knew the absence of witnesses was safety. He reached toward the drawer with my vault override, the one I'd booby-trapped that morning with a microscopic glitter powder and a camera trigger. He didn't open it. Not yet. Just grazed the edge. But that was enough. Enough to confirm intent. Enough to start building the case. I called Kieran again. "Begin the freeze," I told him. "Assets first. Then the educational trusts. Leave the personal accounts. They'll need a false sense of security." He sighed. "Grayson, are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." After I hung up, I walked into the children's bedrooms, kissed Sage on the forehead, pulled Jonah's tablet from under his pillow and set it aside. Tomorrow, they'd leave for a weekend retreat. One they didn't know was really about safety, about protection, about not being in the house when the vault finally opened and exposed everything. But tonight, I stood alone in the hallway between their rooms, and I made a promise I hadn't made aloud before. They wouldn't lose a father. They'd gain a warrior. And Isolde, Luca, they wouldn't see me coming until it was far too late. I hadn't heard the vault drawer creak open in nearly 2 years. I designed it that way, sound dampened, pressure sensitive, and embedded with the kind of anti-theft measures that would make a defense contractor blush. And yet, at 3:14 a.m., that Saturday morning, as the hidden camera in my study captured a man moving like a thief in the house he thought he'd soon inherit, I felt only stillness, not rage, not triumph, just stillness. Luca's hands were gloved.
Thin, sleek nitrile, carefully chosen to avoid fingerprints, but foolishly thin enough to leave trace DNA if even slightly torn. He moved with the confidence of a man who thought the cameras were turned off, who assumed that by betting a woman like Isolde Wynne Pierce, he'd also seduced the infrastructure around her. But my world didn't work like hers. It never had. He slid the drawer open, and the glitter trap ignited with a soft pop. Nothing loud, nothing violent. Just an efficient burst of UV reactive powder that doused him in microscopic specks invisible to the naked eye, but unmistakable under light. He stumbled back, coughing, looked down, saw nothing, but I saw everything. From my office uptown, the live stream fed into 2 encrypted drives and 1 cloud-based forensic mirror that logged every millisecond of his intrusion. At 3:16 a.m., Luca wiped his hands on a handkerchief and fled.
By 3:17, the safe override system automatically relocked itself, and the room returned to perfect stillness. By 3:21, Kiran texted, "Confirmed, footage secure, move to phase 2. I didn't reply right away. I sat there, listening to the subtle hum of my refrigerator, the clink of melting ice in my untouched glass of club soda, and the sound of quiet, my preferred weapon. Then I typed, "Yes. File the provisional custody petition. Emergency motion. Grounds, attempted interference with legacy trust, intent to manipulate minor dependents, endangerment via conspiracy." 10 seconds later, Karen sent back 1 word, "Executed." The game had changed. Isolde didn't notice anything the next morning. She came down for coffee in yoga leggings and a silk tank, hair pulled back in a ponytail that cost more than a semester's tuition at NYU. She kissed Sage on the crown of the head, offered Jonah a smoothie he didn't take, and asked me if we'd considered Aspen or Courchevel for winter break. I didn't answer. I was watching her hands. No glitter. Of course not. She hadn't been the one in the study. But she would have known. That drawer wasn't his to open. He hadn't even been in the house long enough to know it existed. Unless she'd told him. Unless she'd made him feel like it was already his. "Why so quiet?" she asked, breezing past me toward the kitchen island. "You're not still upset about our talk, are you?" I smiled thinly. "No, I've just come to terms with something." She tilted her head. "Which is?" "That silence doesn't mean surrender." She paused, just long enough for a flicker of suspicion to ripple across her forehead. Then she recovered. "Well, that's poetic. Maybe you should write that in the next holiday card." Sage giggled. Jonah looked down, his knuckles white around his phone. They all knew, in their own ways. And that morning, I knew something too. It was no longer about Isolde or Luca. It was about the kids. About what they were being shown, taught, infected by. The lies weren't just relational anymore. They were environmental. And I was done letting my children live inside a poisoned ecosystem. That evening, I met Karen at the Carlyle's private lounge. He was already halfway through a martini, his suit crisp and his energy sharper. "You'll get full custody," he said. No preamble. The tape's gold. The psychological manipulation. The transcript of Sage telling her teacher that Mom says Dad's mind is sleepy now. We're leading with that. I sipped my espresso. "I want this clean." He nodded. "Then let's be surgical." He handed me a folder across the table. I opened it. Inside, documents, affidavits, annotated screenshots. The glitter footage captured Luca's face, hands, the precise moment his pupils dilated with recognition that he'd made a fatal mistake. "There's more," Kieran said. "Luca's company is under audit." "Not a formal investigation yet, but they've flagged some Cayman activity that matches the shell account tied to the transfer Isolde tried to make last quarter." Amount? 1.3 million. I sat back. She thought she could liquidate without triggering alerts. She probably thought you wouldn't notice, or wouldn't act. She was wrong. 3 nights later, I hosted a private dinner. Just friends. Just enough of a distraction to make Isolde feel like things were thawing. She wore a red dress that made everyone's head turn, spoke with flair, laughed too loudly, even toasted me for being the most supportive, composed husband on the East Coast. Everyone clapped. I smiled. Under the table, I watched Jonah text someone, probably Gwyn, probably sending her a photo of the toast. At 10:47 p.m., Isolde took a call from Luca in the study. I knew because her voice was too soft when she re-entered the room. Her smile was tight. Her eyes scanned mine like she was expecting something. At 11:04, she asked if she could meet Luca for 10 minutes outside. I told her to take 20. She didn't realize the front foyer cam had been modified to log audio, not just movement. Later, I'd listen to her say, "We'll move the documents before he notices. His signature's on everything already." She was right. My signature was on everything. And I'd designed it all to snap shut the moment she tried to weaponize it. The next morning, Gwyn texted me a series of screenshots. Isolde had been telling their social circle I'd grown unpredictable, insecure, and emotionally unavailable. The implication was building. She was crafting a case for mental instability, a fallback narrative in case the legal one failed. Kieran saw it too. "She's establishing a foundation for parental incompetence," he said during our Monday meeting. "If she can claim you're emotionally erratic or negligent, it could poison the custody argument." "She won't get the chance," I said. "We go public." He blinked. "Public?" "Not tabloids, not spectacle, but strategic transparency. If she wants to build false credibility through back channels, we drain the credibility first." Kieran nodded slowly. "Gwyn?" "She's ready." Gwyn met me at Bemelman's over lunch. Black cashmere, sharp eyeliner, voice like a velvet knife. "I hated how she used you," she said bluntly. "She made you feel small so she could feel important, and the moment Luca started circling, she got reckless, entitled." "She still is," I said. She sipped her wine. "What do you need?" "Confirmation, texts, screenshots, the message she sent you about soul rebirth and legacy leverage." Gwyn smirked. "I saved everything." "Good. I don't want to bury her. I just want her off the battlefield." "You want her irrelevant." "Exactly." She leaned in. "Then let's make her small." By the end of the week, Kieran filed the formal motion for emergency custody. Grounds: evidence of manipulation, attempted theft, child endangerment through emotional coercion, co-conspiracy with an external party, Luca, under investigation. The document hit like a thunderclap. Isolde didn't see it coming. She'd been planning an influencer brunch at the Baccarat Hotel when she got served. She called me from her driver's car. "This is a mistake," she said. "You're being vindictive." "No," I said. "I'm being protective. You're trying to punish me. I'm preventing our children from becoming collateral in your performance art." She hung up. The next day, Jonah found her sobbing in the guest room. She told him I was trying to erase her, that I was unstable, that I was angry and spiteful. He came to me afterward, quietly, pulled out his phone and showed me something he'd recorded, a voice memo of Isolde saying, "If your father wins, we lose everything." Then she added, "And I don't lose." He asked if that was true. "No," I told him. "She lost the moment she stopped seeing you and Sage as children and started seeing you as weapons." He nodded. "That's what I thought." That night, I slept soundly for the first time in months. Luca, meanwhile, started to unravel. Reports came in that he was being questioned informally about his offshore holdings, that he'd deleted over 200 files from his private server in under 6 hours, that he'd made a call to a mutual friend asking if I had intelligence contacts. He knew the trap was real now, but it was already too late to run. Everything was in motion. The press hadn't touched the story yet, but Gwyn had started seeding truths. Whispered, of course, like Isolde preferred. Only now, the whispers weren't flattering. She was losing her narrative, losing her allies, losing ground, and the glitter still in Luca's pores. I knew because I hired a photographer to follow him under blacklight 3 nights ago. He still sparkled, just not in the way he'd planned. Jonah wasn't supposed to testify. That was the line I hadn't wanted to cross. I'd fought to keep both of them, him and Sage, protected from the courtroom, from the cameras, from the theater of parental warfare that rips children into halves. But Isolde forced my hand. She filed a motion claiming emotional alienation, alleging that I'd turned our son against her, that I'd manipulated Jonah into viewing her as a threat. She called it mental poisoning, weaponized parenting. Her lawyers framed it carefully, of course. Framed me carefully, sensitive, composed, well-educated, and therefore far more dangerous in my silence. Their argument was that because I didn't yell, didn't accuse, didn't perform rage, I was capable of orchestrating deep psychological warfare on a child without ever raising my voice. It was clever. It was vicious. And it was going to backfire. Because the judge approved my emergency petition to have Jonah's testimony heard privately in chambers. "I don't want to hurt her," Jonah said. He sat across from Kieran and me in the study, his posture stiff, hands tucked under his thighs like he was afraid they might betray him. "But I don't want her to lie about you either." "You don't have to say anything that makes you uncomfortable," I told him. "I know," he said. "But she already did." He pulled out his phone. "This is from the morning after the emergency filing. She said you were going to send her away, that Luca was the only one who understood the system. And then she asked me to record you if you ever got weird." Kieran leaned forward. "She asked you to spy on your father?" Jonah nodded. "Said it was insurance." I closed my eyes briefly. There were so many kinds of betrayal in this house. I'd forgotten the most mundane one, using a child as a mole. Kieran said, "That's enough. That's all we need. We'll prep you for chambers, but only if you still want to do it." Jonah looked at me then. His eyes weren't frightened. They were clear. "She stopped being my mom when she made me her ally," he said. "I want to do it." That week, the court appointed a child welfare specialist, Dr. Ramina Sorrell, a sharp, soft-voiced woman with steel-gray eyes and a career full of nightmare stories she never let touch her tone. She interviewed both children separately, then me, then Isolde. She called it creative parenting, Dr. Sorrell told me, pen paused over her clipboard. She said you were raising the children on logical repression and emotional detachment. I didn't flinch. And what did the children say? She smiled faintly. That you braid Sage's hair better than her nannies. That Jonah trusts you more than any adult he's ever met. And that, quote, "Daddy doesn't make promises he can't keep." "Is that enough?" I asked quietly. She met my gaze. "For the court? Yes. For me? It's more than enough." On the morning of Jonah's testimony, Isolde texted me. "First time in 2 weeks. We could still fix this, Gray. We could still win together. Why are you doing this?" I stared at the screen, the bubble of her message still pulsing. The same woman who'd weaponized glitter, betrayal, and 2 children now wanted to play reconciliation card. Kieran saw the message and laughed under his breath. She still doesn't understand. She thinks this is about her. She always did. We didn't reply. Instead, we walked into the courthouse together. Me, Kieran, and Jonah. We were quiet, composed, lethal. Inside chambers, the judge asked gentle questions. Dr. Sorrell sat beside Jonah, hand resting on the arm of his chair like a bridge between pressure and safety. Jonah answered every question with calm precision. He spoke of his mother's erratic behavior, the mood swings, the weaponized affection, the morning she told him to delete texts because it's better if Dad doesn't know what we're planning. He told them about Luca, about waking up early and seeing Luca in the house when Isolde claimed he'd left, about overhearing conversations where they talked about money, hiding things, relocating trust distributions. And then he said something that silenced the entire room. She said if I didn't help her, she might lose us both, that Dad would take us, that she couldn't survive without us. But it didn't sound like love. It sounded like blackmail. No one spoke, not even the judge. When it ended, Jonah walked out slowly, quietly, like he had just stepped off a battlefield. He didn't look back. Isolde's lawyers tried damage control the next day. They accused me of coercing Jonah. They accused Gwyn of leaking information. They accused Dr. Sorrell of bias. They accused everyone, except themselves. But it didn't work. The footage of Luca remained irrefutable. The account logs were precise. The email threads recovered from Isolde's backup cache showed discussions of misappropriating funds earmarked for the Children's Educational Trust. And then the final blow. Luca's attorney sent us a confidential memo requesting a settlement conversation. He was flipping. He wanted immunity, and he was willing to give up everything. Emails, conversations, even screenshots of Isolde admitting that she had been waiting for the perfect financial moment to split the narrative. It was over, and she didn't even know it yet. That night, I received a letter. Hand-delivered. Heavy linen envelope. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper. You were always 2 steps ahead. I underestimated that. She did too. If you still want to burn it all down, I'll hand you the match. But if you'd rather just win quietly, I'll disappear. Either way, I'm out. I showed it to Kieran. He read it, then handed it back. It's a confession, without teeth. But the tone confirms he's breaking. I nodded. We use it for tone, not for proof, but we let her know it exists. You want to watch her crumble? No, I said. I want to watch her realize that this time, no one's coming to save her. The next morning, we filed our final custody escalation. Kieran's team drafted it with surgical precision, every point laced with documented truth, not emotional narrative. Every claim backed with time-stamped evidence, not anecdotal rage. It was airtight. And that afternoon, I called Isolde. She didn't answer, so I left a voicemail. I'm not calling to threaten you. I'm calling to tell you the war is over. You don't need to burn more bridges. You've already collapsed the foundation. The court will see what we've all seen. That you stopped being a mother the day you became a strategist. I won't keep the children from you, but I will protect them from this version of you. If you want visitation rights in the future, show me the woman you used to be, not the one you became when you thought I wasn't watching. She never replied. But 2 hours later, Luca withdrew from their shared accounts. And 12 hours later, Isolde posted a cryptic Instagram story of a single candle burning in the dark, tagged, "From ashes, we rise." The comments were turned off. That week, Jonah had an art showcase. His sketch of a lion, one he'd been working on for months, was displayed under a spotlight with the title, "Some Old Men Bite Back." A few of the parents asked me if it was metaphorical. I told them it was. But Jonah knew. He'd drawn the mane like flames, the eyes like his own, and under the sketch, a tiny signature, JP. That Friday, Sage performed at her school recital. She played Vivaldi, and the room went silent when her bow met the strings. Isolde was invited. She didn't show, but she sent flowers. A bouquet of blue hyacinths and baby's breath with a note in loopy, forced handwriting. "Proud of you, my little star. Always. Sage handed the card to me after the performance. She didn't come, she said. I thought she might try. You don't have to worry about her anymore, I said. Sage looked up at me. I'm not worried. I just wanted her to try. I nodded. That was the thing about children. They forgave even when they shouldn't. They hoped, even when it hurt. It was our job to protect that softness, not weaponize it. By the end of the month, the judge ruled in our favor. Full physical custody to me. Supervised visitation for Isolde, pending a 6-month psychiatric evaluation and parenting rehabilitation plan. Luca disappeared from the state. Gwyn never said, I told you so, but she did send me a bottle of 12-year Macallan with a card that read, Elegance always wins, so does patience. Kieran closed the case with a single statement. May they underestimate you again, he said, so you can remind them twice as hard. I smiled, but I didn't toast, not yet. Because we weren't done, we were just beginning. The first time I saw her after the ruling, she didn't look broken. She looked bored. Isolde stood at the corner of 76th and Madison, waiting for her driver in a wrap coat and oversized sunglasses, sipping an iced matcha like nothing had shifted, as though losing full custody of her children and the trust of her peers had simply been a bad week, easily overcome with some PR gloss and a facial. She didn't notice me at first. I was across the street with Sage, who had just come from her piano lesson. We weren't hiding, but we weren't lingering either. I watched her for 10 seconds longer than I should have. She was still a beautiful woman, always had been, but now it sat on her like a costume that no longer fit. Sage tugged my hand. Is that Mom? I nodded slowly. Sage didn't wave. She just said, I hope she's warmer than she looks, and we walked on. Later that week, Kieran met me in the private boardroom of my holding firm's downtown office. He placed a series of new files on the table, each bound tightly and marked with red tags. Financials, he said. She's shifting assets, quietly, mostly overseas. She's rebuilding? I asked. She's rebranding. Luca's out, but she's not finished. She's making moves through a holding company we didn't recognize at first. Solaire LLC, incorporated in Nevada through 2 dummy agents. What's the intention? Kieran leaned forward. She's acquiring social equity, sponsoring events, leaning into the unfairly maligned woman narrative, painting you as distant, calculating. You're not the villain, but you're the cold ghost in her reinvention story. I exhaled. Let her spin, just not near the children. That's the next problem, he said. She's requested unsupervised visitation. Claimed significant psychological progress, new therapist, character letters from Gwyn, of all people. Gwyn? She folded, or more likely, she was threatened. That stung. Gwyn had been the first to stand beside me when everything cracked. Her betrayal, if true, would be personal. Get me a copy of the letter, I said. Kieran slid it across the table. I opened it. The language was vague, carefully non-committal. Isolde has demonstrated marked emotional awareness and a desire to re-establish safe boundaries with her children. I believe, with appropriate conditions, a path forward exists. It wasn't support, but it wasn't a condemnation either. Cowardice, I murmured. No, Kieran corrected. Politics. I confronted Gwyn 2 days later over lunch at La Mercerie. She didn't deny it. She didn't flinch. She cornered me, Gwyn said, sipping her wine. Said I owed her. That if I didn't help her now, she'd make sure every inch of her fall from grace splashed on me too. She used threats? Threats dressed as promises. The story needs a loyal friend, she said. Someone to say I was misunderstood. It's you, or someone less graceful. I shook my head. And you gave her what she wanted? I gave her ambiguity, not allegiance. That ambiguity could cost visitation protections. She's your ex-wife, Grayson, not a stalker. The courts aren't built to handle strategic sociopathy unless it draws blood. She drew plenty. Gwyn looked down. I know. She paused. But I also know you, Grayson. And you don't want revenge. You want irrelevance. You want her to vanish. I want her to stop orbiting my children like a dying star. Gwyn leaned in. Then stop feeding her gravity. That night, Sage had a nightmare. I found her curled on the hallway floor, crying softly. She was outside the window, she whispered. In the dream, Mom. She was holding a sign that said, Come back to me. But when I opened the door, she screamed. I lifted her into my arms. It wasn't real, sweetheart. She looked real. She's not here. Sage clutched my collar. Promise she won't take me again. That word hit like a punch. Again? She nodded, half asleep. Remember when she took me to Luca's and said we were going to the museum? But then she made me sleep there and said not to tell? I froze. She'd never told me that. And neither had Jonah. She said if I told you, I wouldn't get dessert for a month. She mumbled, already drifting. I held her tighter. And I realized, even after winning custody, I hadn't asked enough. I hadn't unearthed all the fractures. She'd left deeper splinters than I knew. The next day, I called Dr. Sorrell. I relayed Sage's story. She's holding on to trauma the way most children do, quietly, she said. It's not just fear, it's confusion. Attachment doesn't die just because danger reveals itself. What do? You validate it. Let her speak it. Don't rush to soothe. Let the discomfort breathe. And legally? Dr. Sorrell paused. We need to reconsider unsupervised visits. If she's reintroducing herself through coercion or guilt, that's dangerous. Even once a week. I nodded. Then we'll stop her. But it wasn't that simple. Because by then, Isolde had already launched her second move, public redemption. It started with a podcast. Some mid-tier influencer brand invited her to speak on resilience, co-parenting, and rewriting narratives. She played it well. Weepy, self-aware, performatively contrite. She didn't mention me by name, but she didn't have to. The father of my children is brilliant, she said softly. But he's very disciplined, very structured. It didn't leave much space for me. Then she pivoted. I made mistakes. I trusted the wrong people. I was grieving too. But I'm here now. Rebuilding. It was an emotional Trojan horse. Slipped into the feeds of suburban mothers and midlife memoir bloggers. And it worked. The sympathy wave was slow but steady. Comments poured in. You're so brave. We all fall apart sometimes. Glad you're reclaiming your voice. Kieran called me the next day. She's building a platform. She always needed an audience. She's going to use that platform to file for a revision to custody. She's bluffing. Are you willing to bet Sage's stability on that? No, I said. I'm willing to finish what I started. I hired a family behavioral analyst. Not for court. For the children. Her name was Dr. Ilara Quinn. She met with Jonah and Sage privately twice a week. Her job wasn't to report. It was to restore. After 3 sessions, she requested to meet with me alone. Your children are intelligent, grounded, and emotionally self-aware, she said. But they're carrying guilt like it's currency. Guilt about what? Dividing loyalty. They've been made to feel like choosing peace is betrayal. By her. Not just her. By the entire atmosphere. That stung. Because it was true. Even my silence had become oppressive. A weapon of omission. I don't want them to carry my war. Then stop speaking in code. Start naming the things they survived. Jonah asked me over breakfast, "Did Mom really lie in court?" I didn't deflect. I said, "Yes." He nodded, stirred his cereal. "She says she did it to protect us. From you. How does that make you feel?" I don't believe her. But it makes me wonder if you're not telling me stuff too. That hit deeper than any courtroom cross. I reached across the table. "I promise you, Jonah, what I keep from you, I do so to protect your hope, not to manipulate it." He held my gaze. "Can I read the court documents?" I hesitated, then said, "Yes." When you're ready. By month's end, Isolde formally requested expanded visitation. She claimed mental health improvement, submitted glowing reports from a new therapist, paid privately, unlicensed in New York. She submitted testimonials from peers, a staged video of her journaling while grieving motherhood, and 3 pages of poetry she allegedly wrote in Bali. The court hesitated, not because they believed her, but because the optics were shifting, and optics sway decisions. Kieran warned me, "The tide is moving, slowly, but it's moving." I understood, so I moved first. We filed a secondary motion, not to reduce her access, but to require a third-party monitor chosen by the children. The court approved it. Jonah selected Dr. Quinn. Isolde protested, called it biased, but the court ruled her objections as unsubstantiated. For the first time, she wasn't just losing, she was being controlled. Her next move, predictable. She texted me again. "Do you really want them to grow up with a father who erases their mother?" I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded it to Karen. "Enough," I said. "We're filing for narrative protection. You're invoking reputational shielding?" "Yes. I want a formal gag order." "On her?" "No. On me and the children." Kieran paused. "You're taking the high road?" "I'm removing the road entirely." That night, I burned every photo of us from our wedding album, not out of rage, out of clarity. Those images were curated lies, a performance of harmony built on expensive linen and borrowed joy. Jonah found me in the backyard. "Why now?" he asked. "Because your future matters more than our past." He nodded. "Can I burn something too?" He handed me a printed photo, Isolde and Luca at the beach, smiling under a blood-orange sky. She'd posted it once, then deleted it, but Jonah had saved it. We burned it together, and when the flame curled it into ash, I felt something lift, something old, and something final. I hadn't expected the museum gala to be the stage for her unraveling, but then again, Isolde never did implode quietly. The Upper East Side was out in full force that night. Art patrons, hedge fund wives, gallery curators, and legacy board members pretending not to recognize each other while sipping chilled Sancerre. I had been invited months before. My name was on the sponsorship placard. I almost skipped it, but Kieran had insisted. "You're not just Grayson Pierce the father or Grayson Pierce the asset manager," he said. "You're a public figure again, and public figures don't retreat. They redefine." So I wore the midnight navy tuxedo, brought Jonah as my guest, gave Sage the night off with her sitter, and kissed her forehead before leaving. The cab ride was silent. Jonah didn't ask questions, and I didn't press him. At 17, he'd grown into someone whose stillness mirrored mine, measured, intentional, but always calculating. When we arrived, flashbulbs lit the entrance like a runway. Isolde's name wasn't on the guest list, but she came anyway. I saw her first by the Degas bronze. She wore a champagne-colored dress with a plunging back and a smile that tried too hard. A man I didn't recognize clung to her elbow. Too young, too polished. Probably an actor or a startup founder who thought dating a woman like Isolde was a status badge. She turned and spotted me, and for a flicker, just a breath, her composure cracked, not because of me, because of Jonah. He didn't smile, didn't flinch. He simply nodded once, cool and silent, and kept walking toward the mezzanine, where the auction preview was already underway. Isolde approached. "Gray," she said, voice low. Pleasant. Performed. "Isolde," I returned. Flat. "Didn't expect to see you here," she said, eyes flicking down my lapel like she was cataloging my choice of cufflinks. "I was invited," I said. "My name's on the exhibition." "Of course," she said quickly. "So it is." She looked around. "Quite the turnout." "It usually is when there's money and wine." She laughed, brittle. Always knew how to read a room. Then, softer. "He looks good. Jonah? Grown." "He is." She hesitated. "He doesn't answer my texts." "Then maybe he's saying something." Her face stiffened. "I've done everything I can." "No," I said. "You've done everything you thought would preserve your image. That's not the same as parenting." Her companion returned, extended a hand. "Hi, I'm Cal." Of course you are, I thought. Short for Callahan, or Calvin, or something equally beige. "Grayson," I said. "I'm the father of her children." The way he paled told me he already knew. I nodded to Jonah. "Excuse me, I believe my son's about to make a donation." And I walked away. Jonah didn't say much about the interaction. He never did when it came to her. But as the night wore on, his posture changed. Shoulders more drawn, jaw tighter. He was watching her the way one watches a car accident unfold in slow motion. Fascinated, horrified, helpless. She drifted through the event like smoke, charming donors, laughing too loudly, making sure no camera caught her without a strategic pose. At one point, she even pulled Cal into a corner and kissed him. Jonah saw. He didn't react, but he didn't touch his wine again either. "She's trying to bait me," I said later, when Kieran met us at the bar. "She's unraveling," he replied. "That's not bait, that's flailing." "What's her angle?" "Reputation salvage. She's pivoting to the social martyr persona. If the court of law rejected her, she'll flood the court of public opinion. Sympathy buys relevance." "She's already lost that war." Kieran nodded slowly. "But she doesn't know it yet." The next move came on Monday. An open letter. Posted to Medium, Instagram, and republished by a lifestyle magazine. The title, "When a Mother is Silenced, My Fight for the Right to be Seen." She didn't name me, but she didn't need to. She referred to me as the architect, the ghost father, and the polished shadow. She accused me of tactical gaslighting, of co-opting the legal system to erase maternal identity, and of weaponizing affluence. She claimed I'd trained the children to fear her, that I'd hired doctors and tutors who enforced narratives of emotional harm, that I'd reprogrammed them. It was propaganda, dressed in poetry. But the damage, it could have been real, because it spread. It got clicks. It made noise. And I knew what she was doing. She was forcing me to respond. Publicly, legally, violently. She wanted a new war. But I gave her silence. Instead, I gave Jonah the article. Let him read it. When he finished, he said, "She thinks I'm a mirror." "What do you mean?" I asked. "She only sees herself in me, so when I don't reflect her back, she calls it betrayal." I sat beside him. "That's not your burden to carry." He shrugged. "It already was." He paused. "Can I respond? To her? To the article? To people? I want to say something. Publicly. Are you sure? I'm tired of her owning the narrative." I nodded. "Then say it with truth, not vengeance." He did. Jonah's letter went live 2 days later. It wasn't long, just 3 paragraphs, but it cut deeper than anything I could have written. My name is Jonah Pierce. I am 17 years old. My mother recently published an article describing her experience of being silenced. I want to clarify that her silence is not something imposed. It is the result of choices she made, choices that endangered the emotional and psychological well-being of my sister and me. She speaks of being unseen, but for years, all we've seen is performance. I love my mother, but love is not blindness. And my silence is not agreement, it is grief. Within hours it trended, and within 24 hours, her letter was removed from every platform except her website. The media didn't follow up. They didn't need to. Jonah had spoken, and the world believed him. Isolde didn't text me. She texted Gwyn, and Gwyn forwarded it to me. He's lost to me. I can't undo this, not unless I take them back physically. And even then, they won't forgive me. Kieran saw it too. She's slipping into desperation. She's been desperate, I replied. No, he said. Now she's aware of it. That distinction mattered, because 2 nights later she showed up. Uninvited. Unannounced. At the house. I was in the kitchen, finishing an email, when the doorbell rang. Jonah was upstairs, Sage asleep. I opened the door and there she was, wind-blown, wide-eyed, mascara just slightly smudged.
Isolde, I just need 5 minutes. No. Grayson, you don't live here. I gave birth to them. You betrayed them. She flinched. Please, I didn't come to fight. Then you shouldn't have come at all. She stepped forward. Jonah posted that letter. I needed to see him. I needed to tell him. What? That you loved him while manipulating him? That you lied for his sake? She blinked rapidly. You're winning. This isn't a game. You think I don't know that? She stepped back. Fine, I'll go. Then, quietly, but Grayson, one day, they'll resent you for making me disappear completely. I closed the door without answering and locked it behind me. The next morning, I filed for a no-contact buffer zone. Kieran filed it quietly. The judge approved it quickly. It wasn't permanent, but it was firm. She was not allowed within 500 feet of our residence, schools, or any location hosting the children. She called Kieran directly. Please, she said. I just needed to see them. I wasn't going to take them. He recorded the call, for legal purposes. And maybe also for me, because when I listened to it later, I didn't hear regret. I heard entitlement, as though her proximity was a right, as though being their mother gave her eternal access. But she had long since traded that access for performance, and performances have curtains. Jonah asked me, is she going to disappear completely? No, I said, but she'll no longer be a threat. He nodded. That's enough. Then, do you ever wish you hadn't loved her? I thought about it, about the early days, the charm, the fire, the promise. No, I said, because if I hadn't, I wouldn't have you. And that finally made him smile. The letter came on a Tuesday, thick cream stock, no return address, just my name, handwritten in ink I recognized immediately. Her handwriting, slanted, practiced, dramatic even in subtlety. I opened it standing over the kitchen sink, half expecting another plea or accusation. But what I found instead was something else entirely. You win. They don't want me. I've become noise to them. I don't know when I stopped being a mother and started being a story. But I know you saw it before I did. Congratulations, Grayson. You've raised them well. I'm leaving the city. I won't fight anymore.
But don't pretend this was ever just about protection. You wanted to be the savior, even if it meant I had to be the villain. Now you have your legacy. Just know it's built on silence. No signature. No return. Just silence. I didn't respond. I didn't scan it. Didn't show it to Kieran. Didn't mention it to the children. Because by then, her silence was no longer dangerous. It was the only sane choice she had left. 2 weeks passed. The city began to settle back into its spring rhythm. Windows open, sidewalks loud with late-night jazz from brownstone speakers, and Sage's laughter trailing through the air like music when she ran down the hall with her violin case bouncing against her shoulder. Jonah had taken up late-night sketching again. He stayed up until 2 most nights, rendering figures and shadows, drawing versions of the life we now lived, sharpened, quiet, unshaken. It was the first time I allowed myself to consider that we might actually be safe. Until the package arrived. It wasn't from Isolde. It was from Luca. A small manila envelope. No markings. No note. Inside, a USB drive, a typed transcript, and 1 photograph, grainy, time-stamped, and unmistakable. Isolde, sitting across from a man I recognized as a private court-appointed monitor, only he wasn't observing. He was smiling, leaning in, complicit. The transcript was worse. Their conversation, casual at first, but then unmistakably choreographed. Isolde fed him talking points. He responded with affirmations. And then the kicker. She asked him to tailor his summaries to reflect therapeutic alignment, rather than neutral observation. It was a bribe, packaged in euphemism, and she'd recorded herself. Stupid, reckless, desperate. Luca had the footage. Now, so did I. Kieran reviewed it that afternoon in his office, one finger resting against his temple as the audio played out on speaker. "She's done," he said quietly. "This is a federal offense, court manipulation, tampering with a protected monitor." "She used her last card," I said, "and burned the table. We could bury her with this." "We will," I said, "but carefully." The next filing wasn't dramatic. It was surgical. A formal complaint to the court, filed with accompanying evidence under seal. No media, no leaks, just precision. We requested that all of Isolde's prior claims and character assessments be officially struck from record. We requested permanent suspension of all parental rights, pending criminal review. We submitted Luca's statement as corroborating testimony, his signature attached to a plea deal brokered through Kieran's partner in exchange for immunity. The judge responded within 72 hours. An emergency review was scheduled. Isolde didn't show. Her attorney did. Pale, withdrawn, angry. The judge didn't need an argument. He had facts. Motion granted. Custody status. Permanently vested in Grayson Pierce. Parental access. Revoked. Legal consequence. Pending further investigation. It was over. Irrevocably. Undeniably. And yet I didn't feel victorious. I felt relieved. And then I felt tired. When I told Jonah, he didn't react right away. He read the order, stared at the signature at the bottom, then asked, "Is it okay if I don't feel anything yet?" "It's more than okay," I said. He handed the papers back. "I thought I'd feel free." "You are." "I know. I didn't think freedom would feel this quiet." "It always does at first," I said. Then he asked the question I hadn't let myself ask. "Will she go to prison?" "Maybe," I said. "Maybe not." He nodded slowly. "I don't care if she does," he said. "I just don't want her to lie anymore." "She won't," I said. "Not again. Not to you." And then, for the first time since this began, Jonah cried. Silently, shoulders shaking, face turned away. I let him. Let the silence hold it. Let it say what we couldn't. Sage was easier. She sat on the counter while I made dinner, swinging her legs, asking questions. Can she ever come back? Not unless something changes in the law, I said. Do you want her to? I didn't answer right away, so she did. I don't, she said. I wanted her to want us, but not like that. Not with all the lies. She picked a basil leaf off the cutting board, sniffed it. I think it's better this way, she said. I think it's better when love isn't scary. I smiled, then said something I hadn't planned to say. You saved us, you know. Sage blinked. Me? You and Jonah. The way you stayed honest, even when it hurt. That's how we won. She looked down, suddenly shy, then said, We should make pesto tonight. You always make it better than the jar. We did. And we laughed. And for the first time in years, it felt real. That weekend, we went to the shore house. Just the three of us. No staff, no agenda. Just wind and waves and distance. Jonah brought his sketch pad. Sage brought her telescope. We made pancakes at midnight. Played chess at dawn. On Sunday morning, I walked out to the porch and found a note taped to the railing, drawn in Sage's handwriting. Dear Dad, you make the monsters disappear, and you never needed a sword, just truth. That's cooler than magic. Love, your favorite child. Just kidding, Jonah. I kept that note, still do, because in the end, that's what she understood better than most adults. Truth doesn't scream, it simply stays. The first Sunday after everything ended felt unnaturally still. There were no lawyers to call, no court documents to revise, no carefully calculated responses to Isolde's provocations. Just sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows and the soft hum of life returning to itself. I made coffee slowly, boiled the water in a copper kettle I hadn't touched in years. Sage wandered in, rubbing her eyes, hair tangled in a mess of soft curls, her pajama top buttoned wrong. Can we have waffles? Absolutely. Jonah appeared a few minutes later, hoodie pulled over his head, sketchpad under his arm, eyes still heavy with sleep. I had a dream she came back, he mumbled. Was it good? He thought for a moment. It wasn't bad. She just stood at the edge of the yard. I said nothing. That's probably the best we can ask for, I said. He nodded. It didn't feel scary, just distant. I set down his plate. Then maybe your mind's learning to let go. He didn't say anything else, but I saw the relief in his shoulders, the way his body exhaled without needing permission. We ate breakfast together. No tension. No quiet calculations of what might go wrong. Just peace and pancakes. In the weeks that followed, I felt something I hadn't in years. Time. Time that didn't feel stolen or watched. Time that didn't tick with urgency. We walked the promenade together on Wednesdays. Jonah started tutoring a younger boy in his art program. Sage joined a community choir. We existed, not as survivors, but as something closer to whole. I met Kieran for lunch one afternoon at Cipriani. He raised his glass. To peace. I lifted mine. To earned peace. He chuckled. You didn't just earn it, Grayson. You built it brick by brick. I almost lost everything building it. But you didn't. And now, you're the one left standing. I paused. Do you think she'll try again? Legally? No. Emotionally? She already has. But she's spent. No power left. No allies. No platform. She's not the type to fade quietly. No. But she's also not the type who thrives in obscurity. And obscurity is all she has now. I looked out at the street, People rushing between boutiques and offices, lives spinning on without knowledge of the battles we'd fought in private. She doesn't exist here anymore, I said. Kieran nodded. She exists only in memory, and memory bends. 3 months after the final order, I received one last letter. This time, from Gwyn. She apologized, not directly, but with nuance. She wrote about fear, about the burden of shared loyalty, about being caught between the person Isolde used to be and the weapon she became. I watched her shift, Gwyn wrote. And I pretended not to notice because to notice meant I'd have to choose. You chose truth, even when it hurt. I chose convenience, and that's a failure I'll wear for a long time. She didn't ask for forgiveness, which is how I knew it was genuine. I wrote back, briefly. I appreciate your honesty. The children are well. So am I. That's enough for now. She never responded, and that, too, felt right. Jonah got into Parsons, full scholarship, top of his portfolio class. When the acceptance came in, he didn't jump or cry. He just sat down on the edge of the couch, holding the letter like it was heavier than it looked. I didn't think I'd get it, he said. Why not? He looked up at me. Because for years I didn't know what I wanted to say. My art felt like noise, anger and sadness and fragments, nothing whole. And now? Now it's still broken. But it's honest. Honest is enough, I said. He nodded. Yeah. I think it is. Later that night, I found a new sketch on his desk. It wasn't of a person or a building. It was a chair. Just a simple chair, perfectly drawn, bathed in light from an open window. At the bottom, he'd written, "Sometimes peace looks like waiting with the door open." I didn't cry, but something in me softened permanently. Sage wrote a poem that won a regional award. She read it on stage, her small voice steady, her hands gripping the sides of the paper like it was the only anchor in the world. Love isn't always safe. Sometimes it wears perfume and promises. Sometimes it disappears in courtrooms. But sometimes it makes waffles and listens and never leaves. She didn't mention Isolde. She didn't need to. Every line was a quiet acknowledgement of absence and of the love that remained. When she finished, she bowed quickly and ran off stage. She buried her face in my coat. I didn't cry, she said. I almost did, I replied. She looked up at me. Is that okay? It's perfect. I didn't date for a long time, not because I was broken or afraid or unwilling, but because I needed to live in the fullness of the life I'd rebuilt. On my own terms, without performance, without shadows. Eventually, that life made space for someone new. A quiet, thoughtful man named Elias who had 2 dogs, a complicated laugh, and no patience for social climbing. He met Jonah after 2 months, met Sage after 3. He never pushed, never pretended, just showed up. And they noticed. One night, Sage whispered to me, "He doesn't try to fix things. He just holds them." And I thought, maybe that's what love should have always been. Isolde never came back. Not to the city, not to the courts, not to us. There were rumors, whispers of her trying to reinvent herself in Napa or Paris or Berlin, but none of it mattered anymore. She'd become what she feared most, irrelevant, not destroyed, just unnecessary. She faded from our lives like a painting taken off a wall, not torn, not ruined, simply gone. And in her absence, we found something better than revenge. We found freedom. The last night of summer, Jonah and Sage and I sat on the roof of our building. The air was warm. The city buzzed beneath us. Jonah lay on his back, tracing constellations. Sage rested her head on my lap. "Are we done?" she asked softly. "With what?" "The war. I looked out over the skyline, and I said, "We are." And I meant it, because for the first time in a long time, nothing was hiding under the surface. No danger, no secrets, no lies curled like smoke in the corners of our lives. Just truth, and silence, and each other. Sometimes the deepest betrayals don't come with screaming matches or slammed doors. They unfold quietly, in the erosion of trust, in the theater of appearances, in the spaces where love was supposed to live, but simply didn't. And in those moments, the hardest battle isn't the fight to win, it's the fight to remain whole. This story wasn't about revenge, it was about reclamation, about rebuilding something sacred after everything tried to make you forget who you were. It's about learning that silence can be strength, that dignity often speaks loudest when unshaken, and that truth, steady, unadorned truth, is more powerful than any performance. Healing doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it looks like a late-night sketch, a child's handwritten note, or a quiet morning when the chaos has finally stopped. Sometimes, the real victory isn't in proving someone wrong, it's in knowing you no longer need to. Thank you for being part of this journey with us. If this story moved you, made you reflect, or reminded you of your own resilience, please share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. We have more stories waiting that just might speak to your heart. Until next time, thank you for watching.